Welcome back to the Banderpod, the fantastical and flexible podcast of Bandersnatch Books. We're a small press publisher of treasures found off the beaten path for lovers of all that is good, true, and beautiful. I'm Rachel Donahue, and today I get to palaver with my friend Carolyn Clare Givens about her books and where stories come from. If you're not familiar with her work, Carrie is the author of the YA fantasy novel Rosefire, as well as a parable-ish chapter book called The King's Messenger, both of which are available from Bandersnatch Books. In the words of P.G. Wodehouse, there is no surer foundation for a beautiful friendship than a mutual taste in literature. That about sums up my friendship with Carrie, so enjoy this bookish conversation. Carolyn Clare Givens, welcome to the other side of the Banderpod.
Why, thank you, Rachel. It's so nice to be here. I feel like I've never been here before.
Right. It's a new experience. So I know our listeners are somewhat familiar with you already, but why don't you start by briefly telling us how you became a writer?
Oh, that is actually a good question. When I was in college, I remember someone saying to me, a mentor saying to me, just very offhandedly in like sidebar conversation, well, of course, you're a storyteller. And I was like, I'm sorry, wait, what? And that was a revelation to me as a, 21-year-old. And yet, looking back, I'm like, yeah, I'm a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And so my writing pretty much started as soon as I could write. I would in like first grade. I don't know if we did it in kindergarten, but anyway, first grade, our teacher would have us like come and tell her a story and she would write it down and then we would copy her handwriting.
That's cool.
And then like once we were writing ourselves, we were writing and I don't think many of those remain. I don't think they made it through the moves, but I feel like somewhere I do have something from that early. There was one about family, and there was an apple tree in the backyard because my dad had just planted apple trees in our backyard. Anyway, um, so like always was writing. I wrote a million Ella Montgomery knockoff short stories
Mm-hmm.
in middle school and high school and probably into college. And I remember thinking at some point in college, I wonder when I'll have a story idea that's big enough to carry the weight of a novel, like a
Mm.
big enough story, a complex enough story that it would take the length of a novel. Even The King's Messenger, which I wrote the first chapter of The King's Messenger, the first few chapters of The King's Messenger while I was in college. Actually, maybe just two of them. But anyway, the idea for it came in a Great Christian Writers class, which is also where I was introduced to T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets. So it was a very pivotal class in my
Sounds like it.
writing experience. But anyway, King's Messenger, it started as short stories. I wrote the chapters as
Oh,
standalone stories, and
that
then
makes sense.
I wrote them probably over the course of almost 15 years. And
Hmm.
toward the end was like, I think these are weaving together into a book,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't start as a novel-sized story. It is not a novel size. It's a
Interesting.
collection
Yeah,
of
yeah,
10 short story-sized
yeah,
stories.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is. But they
Yeah.
cohere
Yes,
together
they do.
really
They
well.
do. But a lot of that happened in editing.
Of course.
So yeah, Rosefire really was the first novel-sized story that I had an idea for, and that was when I was in grad school. And so had the idea in a class. I have a lot of ideas while other people are talking. Um,
You're not the only
Clearly,
one.
I'm an excellent listener, but had the idea in a class and then stuck it on a back burner to write my thesis, which was something entirely different, but came back to it, maybe a year or two after the original idea. And that's when I started drafting it.
Very cool. All right. So before we get too much farther in the conversation, can you give like the 30-second elevator pitch for each of your books?
Yes, absolutely. So, The King's Messenger is a chapter book that is for younger readers or as a read aloud for kids. Smuggins is a messenger for the king, and in every single chapter, he has an adventure. And in his adventures, he learns more about the king's character and more about what it means to be a servant, a good servant of the king. In Rosefire is set in the kingdom of Asael, which is a kingdom in crisis. And Karen, the narrator, is the daughter of a nobleman, and on her doorstep arrives a girl who has no memory but great skill in magic. And Karen always thought that magic was just something that the peasants and the priests believed in. It wasn't something real. And here, this appearance starts her and her brother and their friends on a journey to rediscover the ancient writings of the kingdom. And the ancient writings speak of the promised Rose, who's to be the hope of the kingdom. So they
Mm.
start to wonder if perhaps they may have found the Rose.
Good stuff.
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in the past, you've said that you are not a writer of poetry, even though we did cobble together a found poem for our poetry
We
anthology.
did.
But I know that poetry has had a big impact on what you write. So, talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I am not much of a producer of poetry. I tend to be more verbose and less precise with my words than necessary for good poetry. However, I am a big reader of poetry, and I was thinking about this just recently, listening to a podcast, again, thinking about something else while listening to
Hmm.
a podcast. The podcast was about poetry, but I was thinking about it and I'm like, I've enjoyed reading poetry since childhood and enjoyed reading classic poetry since high
Hmm.
school. I mean, I always loved like Shel Silverstein and stuff like that, but I fell in love with Tennyson in high school. And I mean,
Mm.
Tennyson remains up there on my list of favorite poets. So, yeah, so poetry, what tends to happen for me in poetry and reading poetry, especially in relation to my writing,
Hmm.
is I'm reading a poem and there's an image or a turn of phrase or something, and I start, because what I do with poetry, what I do when I'm listening to people talk, I start revving on that and just coming around to it again and again. And maybe I do it with song lyrics too. Like, here's this little turn of phrase, and I want to tell the story that's
Mm.
behind that turn of phrase.
Mm.
And so, like, when I said Smuggins, the King's Messenger came to me in Smuggins showed up in my imagination reading Milton's sonnet on his blindness.
Hmm.
And at the end of it is this phrase, which becomes the epigraph of chapter one. His state is kingly, thousands at his bidding speed, and post o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait.
Hmm.
And I suddenly had a servant of the king who had never been called on to go.
Mm.
And that's where the story started. And then for Rosefire, it started with T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets. And again, I read that for the first time in that great Christian writers class, fell in love with Four Quartets. Like it is
Hmm.
stands as probably my favorite poem. It's four
Mm.
poems, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Technically, actually, each of those four poems has five poems in it. But
It's okay. You can geek out about poetry. Don't mind.
but again, it was a single line. Like I love the whole poem and the themes throughout the poem, and Rosefire is full of so much of it, but it was a single line that, and again, this is 8, 9 years after originally reading the poem. Like I'd been reading it for 9 years by the time this line hit
Mm.
me that says, ash on an old man's sleeve is all the ash the burnt roses leave.
Mm.
And suddenly there was an old man, and he was in like a monk's habit, and his sleeve was covered with ash, and he had to shake it off. And it was ooh, who's he? Ooh, what's his story? What's really funny is originally I thought there may be spoilers for my books in this conversation. I will try to avoid like the biggest ones, but they're good even if you know what happens already.
That's right.
Um,
That's right. It's like rereading.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So originally in my mind, there's a monk in the book named Brother Ezra. And originally in my mind, the old
Hmm.
man was Brother Ezra. And that's whose story, you know, I needed.
Hmm.
Brother Ezra is actually not in the scene where Ash is shaking off an old man's sleeve. And it was one of those where I, was as the story was developing, was going, oh dear, it's not going to actually be him.
Yep.
But so I started with Brother Ezra and went from there.
It is interesting. Just that seed of an idea, like a fawn with an umbrella in the woods,
Hmm.
and just the whole world that can be built around this one image. So let's talk about world building for a little bit in that process. And I know that you've had people speak into world building and some of the areas where you're weaker on that. And so I want to just talk about that process and tell our listeners like who helped you build the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, like I started with a single line of poetry and a single character. But so for Rosefire, kind of the pieces came together. I have a spatial mind. Like I can tell you if something is going to fit in the space by looking at it, kind of thing. I can walk into a house I have not been in since I was 4 years old and I remember the layout, things like that. And so I had, the opening scene is in the manor house of Karen's father, and I had the layout of that house down pat. But like, what was outside that house? They were on a cliffside by the ocean, but eventually they had to go to a capital. I didn't know what
Mhm.
like all of those spatial mind and the spatial mentality, like wasn't working on a like global sense. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
so there was actually a friend got married up in Maine, and I went up for the wedding. And on the way back, my friend Seth Antes drove back with me. And Seth is Mr. Let me draw a map of the fictional world in your imagination guy.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a 9-hour drive from Maine back to Philadelphia. And I was at a point in the story where like I had this capital, I had where the manor house was, I had these caves that were somewhere, but like I needed the crux, I needed the crisis of the story to take place in the capital. And I couldn't figure out how to force everyone into the capital because I was like, well, why wouldn't they just go around? Like that
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make sense that everybody's going straight through the capital. And so like had to work through the geography of the land in order
Mm-hmm.
to conceptually figure out how can I force everyone through the capital. And because they need to be on the bridge of boats, because I had the image of the
Yes.
bridge of boats, which I stole from MMK's Shadow of the Moon, that I was like, a bridge of boats? That's genius. The author is named MMK, and she is amazing, but it's like historical fiction and it's set in India. And she has this scene where like one of the characters has to blow the bridge of boats so that the army can't get through. And I was like, that's genius. The idea of a bridge of boats strapped together with ropes, and you can cross a river.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
and I was just so fascinated by that. So anyway, I had to get everybody through there. So like, yeah, so Seth really helped me kind of work that through. And my friend Christine, who was my roommate at the time, she was my like she was the person who would be like, so could you read it to me? And suddenly I would have to, write more chapters because I had someone to read it to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's a great motivator.
it is. It's really, but she also like she would just ask questions, and
Mm.
that would make me start thinking about things in the world building
Yeah.
aspect of it, and how does it actually make sense, and how does it work, and all of those things.
Yeah. Mm. But the revolution that happens in this book doesn't follow the typical fantasy formula of like good guys fight the bad guys and win. So what is it that sets Rosefire apart? And can you talk about how that developed?
Yeah. So overturning the expectation of redemptive violence
Yes.
and, this idea that overthrowing the power
Mm-hmm.
is going to be violent. And I am not somebody who seeks out violence. And honestly, like, if I look back at my family history, I'm 3 generations removed from Quakers and 2 generations removed from Mennonites. So we're pretty
Yeah.
pacifist.
Yep.
My family are just, your traditional standard American Christians, but generally pretty pacifist. And the idea of, the crisis that comes to the Bridge of Boats and all of that, like a big battle scene. Don't know that I can write a big battle scene. Don't
Mm.
think I'd be very good at that. But also B, that didn't feel satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was working on that section, I was in a book club on the book Through a Screen Darkly
Hmm.
by Jeffrey Overstreet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's his experience of movies. Like it's almost like halfway between a movie critic and a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeffrey is probably pretty close to a pacifist. Uh, I don't know if he'd call himself that, but definitely leans that direction. And so we're reading through this book together, and in one of the chapters, like he specifically talks about a movie that, and I couldn't tell you for the life of me which movie it is, that eschews violence as the answer.
Hmm.
And I remember like this penny drop kind of moment of, oh,
Hmm.
that's how it needs to go. They need to say, no, I will not do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also then goes hand in hand with I am constantly fascinated by someone who has power and either chooses not to use it or chooses to use it only on behalf of someone else.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's why I like Jesus's story.
I mean, there is something compelling
There's
about
something pretty compelling about this. But like Son of Laughter, who does
it.
our
Mm-hmm.
podcast theme song, he has a song called The Great One.
Yes.
And that song, the turn of that song,
Mm-hmm.
brings me to tears every single time I listen to it. And it's because he's telling the story of Caesar Augustus, who is the Great One. And he's the mighty one, and he's all these things. And then he calls a census, and Mary and Joseph come to Bethlehem, and there is born a child. And the turn is, and he will be called the poor one,
Mm-hmm.
the meek one, the gentle one, that like all of these things. And it's through those that Jesus is the great one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like it blows my mind every single time. And so I kind of also loved the idea of not only not using violence, but not using the power for their own good
Hmm.
and taking that hands up approach, not hands up of surrender, but hands up of this. I recognize this is not the way, with my hands like on the gears, pushing things forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just take my hands off and trust that there is a power
Hmm.
that is greater than I am,
Yeah.
and that power has a plan and has
Hmm.
a way to move the story forward, and I
Yeah.
don't need to push it.
Yeah. Releasing it to God.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so, in Rosefire, that's what they realize, like in the crux. The battle does begin. You don't see any of it because I don't know how to write that. So, but the battle begins, but they realize, after trying to push for a few hours, like, wait, no, we need to stop. We need to step back,
Hmm.
and we need to let someone fight for us.
Hmm.
And yeah, just that like that turn and that difference between that and a, a vigilante justice, or, a superhero that uses violence to take out the bad guy. And it's like, oh,
Right.
is he a hero? And I
Right.
think
Yeah.
our cultural storytelling likes playing with that space a lot.
Yes.
And
Yes. And you can see that in our broader
mhm,
culture where the same thing that you would condemn someone else for, that you would condemn your enemies for, you then celebrate for the person who is
yeah,
on your
yeah,
side. And so it's this
yeah,
compromising, this kind of making excuse for because they're for the
right,
right side.
right,
And this is I love that your story threads the needle a
yeah,
different way. And
yeah. I
yeah.
I love sci-fi TV and movies. It's one of my things I
Mm-hmm.
love. And one of the things I love about sci-fi is there tend to be themes. Like if you're in a particular sci-fi show, there is one philosophical element that they're chewing on
Mm-hmm.
for most of the
Yep.
things. So one of my absolute favorite shows is Farscape,
Mm-hmm.
which was made by the Jim Henson Company. So the crazy aliens are puppets, and it's amazing. Um, they're really good. They do not look like the Muppets, but it's one of my favorite shows. And there is a people group in the world that are called the Peacekeepers.
Hmm.
They are the most violent and most visually very like Nazi slash Soviet Cold War look. They cut people off like as soon as they are impure and things like that.
Mm.
And the way that they turn it around at the very end, because I remember like having this thought that like sci-fi shows tend to chew on particular themes and stuff like that. And I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking about like how that story comes full arc and going, what's the theme that Farscape is really chewing on? And what it really comes down to in the end is the nature of peace. And
Hmm.
is peace possible? And then essentially, is it peace if it's peace at any cost? And
Mm.
that's what the main character winds up showing everyone in the end is if it is peace at any cost, it is not peace. It is not
Mm.
worth it. And it's a really powerful exploration of that idea. But again,
Mm.
even in the course of
Mm-hmm.
proving that point, there's a lot of people who die.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well,
so
I'm
yeah.
really thankful we have good stories to bend our imagination in a
Hmm.
different way. So thank you for writing one. All right. So the next question is one that I know the answer to, but our listeners may not. What do you have in the works now, and what do your readers have to look forward to from you?
Well, if you read this book when you were 12, you might read the next book when you're 25. Um, but you know what? That's about the timestamp difference between the settings of the two books.
That's right.
So I am very, very slowly working on a sequel to Rosefire. And Rachel, you are a huge part of that being in existence because when we were doing marketing for Rosefire, you were asking me in I think it was an Instagram interview or something that we did.
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, who's your favorite character? And I was like, I know you're not supposed to have them, but I do. And and my favorite character is named Edmund, and he's kind of a side character in Rosefire. And he's one of those characters that sort of appeared. He wasn't in my original four,
Mm-hmm.
and appeared as I was writing. And then I was like, oh, wait, hold on. He's the main character. Anyway, he became one of my absolute favorite characters. And so we were talking about him as a character, and you said, well, Edmund is a namer. And we've had conversations about this concept of naming that I'm
Mm-hmm.
another thing I'm slightly obsessed with. And just that, like, we need people in our lives who identify clearly for us who we are because we don't always see ourselves. And Edmund very much plays that role in a lot of his interactions throughout Rosefire. And as soon as you said that, I was like, Oh, there could be a sequel, and Edmund could be the focal point, learning what this role as a namer is. And
Hmm.
and also probably going to be avoiding redemptive violence.
Yep. And I adore the start that you've made on this story. It's really good. So we need to find a way to get you
I
back
know,
working on
I
that,
know. We should
Carrie.
stop publishing books so that I could write.
Maybe we should. We can, read
There
you
we
some
go. There we
poetry
go.
and give you some ideas.
Um, I feel like, and it's another, I mean, you heard some of my process of writing Rosefire. I am a slow writer. I kind of had to find the story. I don't have the whole thing. I have a
Hmm.
concept to go with. And when I very first had the idea, I mean, that was what, 2021, a long time ago.
Hmm.
And had to chew on it for quite some time. And another factor in the mix is for Edmund, I very specifically made him a character not tempted by power
Hmm.
and wanted to think about, like, in Rosefire, like, have that character that was a Faramir of sorts
Hmm.
who isn't tempted by the ring in Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
But a good man who's just a good man is not a particularly interesting protagonist. And so I
True.
needed to, figure out, like, well, what does a good man who is not tempted by power, what's his flaw? Because he's
Hmm.
gotta he's gotta grow somewhere. He's gotta overcome something. And so figuring out what that was and trying to
Hmm.
dig into the personality and all of that. And so that took a really long time. Like, that took several years to kind of crack that nut of, like, oh, this is how he can be flawed and need
Hmm.
to grow. And then, just starting to write, but like, I've written scenes from the first, part of the book, and then I've written scenes from essentially the last chapters of the book. And now I have to fill in the
Yep.
the other
Just the
pieces
messy
in
middle.
between.
That's all you need.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have some popcorn questions for you
Okay.
before we go. So, if you had to introduce yourself using the works of only three authors, which authors would you choose?
Ooh. Dorothy Sayers,
I knew that.
particularly Harriet Vane. Um,
I'm 1 for 3.
you probably are going to be 3 for 3. The third one might be a bit of a question mark. Sense and Sensibility,
Oh.
the character of Eleanor.
Hmm.
I resonate very deeply with Eleanor.
I could see that.
And I feel like probably the third one isn't, here's a character that I'm like, but is something like, read 4 quartets so you understand me. Um,
I am 2 for 3.
what was your third?
I hadn't really settled on one. There were
Okay.
there were a lot of like stories out there that I was like, oh, I don't know. So it was a little nebulous, but yeah. All right, awesome. Okay, Carrie, do you
Hmm.
have any thoughts on pie?
I have serious thoughts on pie. Crumble crusts or crumble tops are of the devil. I might have lightened, the phrasing of that in the final poem. They're an
So,
anathema and they should be disowned from the world. Although there is one caveat to that. Shoe fly pie needs a crumble top. Have you
interesting.
ever had shoe fly pie?
I have not.
Do you like molasses?
Hmm.
I need to introduce you to shoe fly pie. It's a
Yes, you
good
do.
Lancaster
I
County
mean,
dish.
any pie.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm game.
Shoe fly pie is sort of like a molasses brownie in a crust.
Ooh, I'll take that. I mean, I have a sweet tooth, so.
I know you would actually, you'd love it. Anyway, so,
Yeah.
but I firmly believe that fruit pies are the best kind of pie. Pie should be a breakfast food, especially, I mean, like, gracious, we are in November here. Pumpkin pie
Yeah.
is breakfast food. I mean, it is
Yeah.
egg and dairy and carbohydrate. It is breakfast food.
It's all you need.
And
So
so, yeah.
for our listeners who are not aware, in I've Got a Bad Case of Poetry, we do have a poem from Carrie that is serious thoughts on pie. And it's a bunch of lines taken from multiple blog posts that she has written on the topic of pie. And it's delightful. I love it. So, okay, Carrie, what are you reading right now?
Oh, I am I'm currently in an audiobook called The Plantagenets, which I regaled you with
Mm-hmm.
pieces of what I was learning. So it's about the Plantagenet dynasty, which was British kings and queens from 1100-ish forward for like 300 years, kind of up until the Wars of the Roses. And I love history. And I was like, I could learn more about the Plantagenets. And this audiobook was there and it looked interesting and it looked like it might be well written. And it is incredible. I really love listening to narrative nonfiction. Like that's one
Mm,
of my favorite genres of audiobook, particularly. And this author, while he's telling many generations worth of stories, he is an excellent storyteller. And he even says
mm,
in the introduction, like, I am recounting history, but I'm also telling you the story of these
mm.
of these people. And he's a really good storyteller. And it is fascinating. I have become like, I want to say begrudging because he was not a good person, but it's really just absolute awe and fandom over Henry II, who was an insane politician king. Like, so good at what he did. He is, if you've ever seen the movie The Lion in Winter, he is Peter O'Toole's character, the father
Mm.
of Richard Lionheart and of Prince John, of Robin Hood stories, etc. He was married to Eleanor of Aquitaine. Yeah. Anyway, so I've moved 5 generations beyond him already, but I'm still like obsessed with Henry's story.
Love it.
So yeah, that's the big one on the docket at the moment.
That's fun. All right. What is your favorite season and why is it fall?
Autumn is a drug for me. If you see any of my Instagram posts in autumn of leaves, the
Mm-hmm.
hashtag is autumn is a drug for me, which I'm 90% sure I stole from N.D. Wilson's book Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl, but I've
Ah,
never been able to find the quote again.
interesting.
So I'm like, where did I actually get it? Maybe it was there and I just can't find it. But
Mm.
but yeah, I adore autumn and grew up in the north. I grew up in Michigan. I then I went to Pennsylvania for college. I then went to Alaska for a couple of years where autumn is a full 10 days long. Um,
Mm.
and so it's real short, but it is glorious for 10 days. And then growing up in Michigan, autumn was like just barely a month. And then it's pre-winter. And then going to Pennsylvania, it was like, oh, we're at like 6 weeks. Like this is great. And then I moved here to North Carolina, and autumn is like 8 weeks long here.
Yeah,
And
it's a whole thing.
it's a whole thing. And I've done, 2 week autumn, 1 month autumn, 6 week autumn, and 2 month autumn. And I will take 2 month autumn. Unfortunately, I have to live with the summer as well. And
Yeah,
the stupid winters. Winters here are just dumb because they're not
yeah.
real.
No. We don't get enough snow for it to be a real winter.
Exactly.
All right. Last question. Let's say you were given an hour to wander a bookstore. What things would you look for? What would catch your eye and make you pick up a book?
Is it a used bookstore or a new books?
A new bookstore.
Okay. Because there's very particular things I'd be looking for in a used
Yes, there
bookstore.
are.
I would likely start in the middle grade section.
Hmm.
Love reading middle grade. That I actually don't read a ton of fantasy middle grade. I tend toward more hope-filled, realistic-ish stories. I would say there is a genre that I don't think is developed officially as a genre, but that I think is an American version of magic realism,
Hmm.
where there is something beyond the fabric of our world that is a bit fantastic, but the characters you're following are from our world, and they just sort of cross this veil into not so much a portal, but like the magic just sort of enters their lives.
Hmm.
That's probably my favorite kind of fiction.
Hmm.
And middle grade has a good number of books that do that sort of thing. So I would start in middle grade, work my way through there. And then I probably might wander in poetry. I might go look at classic literature and see if there's anything, especially if it's nicely bound,
Yes.
so as to flicker in the firelight. Um, is there another copy of Jane Eyre?
Yes.
Because I only have 7, and that is definitely not enough.
Yep,
And
that's right.
so things like that. I think that would be, I would likely stay away from the like contemporary fiction
Yeah.
section
There's a
almost
lot of that.
entirely.
And it's all up front. Like
It's all up front. Yeah.
Yeah. Just bypass it. All right. Well, Carrie, thanks for hanging out and talking books with me today. It's been a lot of fun. All right. So, listeners, our last episode of the season will be a Q&A episode. You can go to our Instagram or Facebook page or send us an email with your questions and we will answer them. You can ask me or Carrie or Annie Beth or all three of us, whatever you want, and we'll talk about it. And in the meantime, may you find bookish treasures in your wanderings off the beaten path. Thanks for listening in to our conversation today on the Vanderpod. We hope you'll check out our full catalog at bandersnatchbooks.com. The Vanderpod is produced by Rachel S. Donahue, A.B. Donahue, and Carolyn Clare Givens. Audio engineering by S.D.G. Morgan. Artwork by Evelyn Warnamundi. Many thanks to our friend Chris Slayton of Son of Laughter for our theme song, Cricket in a Jar. Find links and more in the show notes.